The massive fleet of the galactic hegemony emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 12 warships, each the size of a small moon, took up formation around Admiral Krithak's flagship, the Imperial Dawn *. Their sleek, crystalline hulls sparkled in the distant sunlight as they prepared for what should have been a routine first contact mission. Admiral Krithak stood on the bridge of his flagship, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he studied the holographic display of the solar system before him. His silver scales shimmered under the soft blue lights of the bridge as he flicked his tail in anticipation. "Primitive system," he muttered, noting the single inhabited planet with its lone satellite. Not even a proper orbital ring yet. The bridge crew nodded in agreement, their mandibles clicking in amusement. That's when the message arrived. It came in perfect Imperial standard, transmitted on all frequencies. "Leave, for your own safety." The bridge erupted in laughter. Krithak himself couldn't help but bare his teeth in what his species considered a smile. In 300 years of expanding the hegemony's borders, he'd never encountered such boldness from a pre-FTL civilization. "Send the standard response," Krithak ordered. "Inform them of their upcoming integration into the hegemony and the benefits thereof." His communications officer complied, transmitting their carefully crafted message of peaceful first contact. They waited for the reply, but only silence answered. As the fleet moved deeper into the system, their sensors began picking up unusual readings from Earth's moon. At first, Krithak dismissed them as equipment malfunctions, but as they drew closer, the readings became clearer. "Admiral," his science officer called out, her scales paling slightly. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from their satellite. The entire moon. It's hollow." Krithak moved to her station, studying the readings himself. The moon was indeed riddled with tunnels, chambers, and what appeared to be massive power sources. It wasn't just a satellite, it was a fortress. "Curious," he mused. "They've turned their moon into a military installation instead of expanding to other planets. Most inefficient." Still, it wasn't cause for concern. The hegemony had subdued far more advanced civilizations. This would be no different. "Launch the diplomatic fleet," Krithak commanded. In hegemony terms, diplomatic fleet meant a show of force, 2,000 smaller vessels that would surround the planet in an intimidating display of power. As the diplomatic fleet assembled, Krithak's tactical officer suddenly straightened in his chair. "Admiral." Energy spiked from the moon. Thousands of structures were emerging from the lunar surface, weapon platforms, if Krithak had to guess. But something was wrong. They weren't orienting themselves toward the hegemony fleet. Instead, these platforms, these weapons, were pointing at empty space. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice wavered. "Those weapons, our sensors can't even identify what they are. The energy readings don't make sense." Krithak felt the first hint of unease crawl down his spine. In 3 centuries of service, he'd never encountered weapons he couldn't identify. The humans were supposed to be primitive, yet they had transformed their moon into an armed fortress with technology that defied the hegemony's understanding. And they were aiming at nothing. "Get me a direct channel to their leaders," Krithak ordered. "I want to know what they're." The space before his fleet suddenly began to tear apart, and Krithak realized, with growing horror, why the humans had warned them to run. The tear in space started small, like a crack in glass. Admiral Krithak watched as it spread, his experienced mind struggling to understand what his 4 eyes were seeing. The void between stars was breaking apart, and his fleet's sensors were going crazy. "Status report," he barked, his tail twitching with nervous energy. "Sir, we're detecting." "Nothing," his science officer replied, her scales turning a pale shade of fear. "The instruments say there's literally nothing there, but we can all see it." The tear had grown larger now, about the size of one of their smaller ships. That's when the lunar defense platforms came to life. Thousands of weapons, previously aimed at what had seemed like empty space, began to hum with power. The energy readings were off the charts, unlike anything the hegemony had encountered in its 1,000 years of space travel. Incoming transmission from the human command, the communications officer announced. A voice, calm but urgent, filled the bridge. You need to move your fleet back. Now, you're in the kill zone. Krithak bristled at being ordered around by a primitive species, but before he could respond, something emerged from the tier. Something that shouldn't exist. It was massive, larger than his flagship. Its form seemed to shift and change, defying the laws of physics. Where it should have had a surface, it had only depths. Where there should have been matter, there was only the absence of reality itself. By the first stars, someone whispered on the bridge. The lunar defense platforms opened fire. Beams of light that bent in impossible ways struck the entity. Where they hit, reality itself seemed to stabilize, forcing the creature into a more solid form. It screamed, not with sound, but with a ripple through space-time itself. "Sir," his tactical officer shouted. 2 more spatial anomalies forming. And the humans, they're launching something from the moon. From the lunar surface rose what looked like massive mechanical warriors, each the size of a small destroyer. They'd move with impossible grace for their size, propelled by engines that left trails of bent light in their wake. "This is Luna Command to all stations." The human transmission came again. Titan-class entity confirmed. Deploying Warmind units 3 through 7. Admiral, get your fleet out of here. You're not equipped for this fight. Krithak wanted to be offended, but he was too busy being amazed. The mechanical warriors, the Warmind units, engaged the entity with weapons that seemed to ignore the normal rules of physics. They weren't just fighting the creature, they were fighting the very wrongness of its existence. More tiers were forming now. More entities were emerging. The lunar defense platforms adjusted their aim with perfect precision, their impossible weapons ready to fire again. "Sir," his first officer spoke quietly, "perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal. We don't even understand what we're seeing." Krithak watched as one of the human Warmind units grappled with an entity, its weapons causing the very fabric of space to ripple and stabilize. These weren't the actions of a primitive species. This was the work of a civilization that had been fighting gods. "All ships, fall back to minimum safe distance," Krithak ordered. "Maintain observation position, but do not engage. I want every sensor we have recording this." As his fleet retreated, Krithak finally understood the human warning. It hadn't been about protecting themselves from the hegemony. They had been trying to protect the hegemony from something far worse. And now he was about to witness exactly what humanity had been fighting all this time. The battle unfolding before Admiral Krithak's eyes defied everything he knew about warfare. The void entities, these titans as the humans called them, moved in ways that hurt to look at. Where they passed, sensors failed and reality itself seemed to bend. Third entity emerging from the largest breach, his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. It's bigger than the others." The new Titan towered over the battlefield, its form a writhing mass of angles that shouldn't exist. It reached out with what might have been a limb, and one of the hegemony's observer ships simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just gone. "Admiral," the human transmission cut through the chaos. "We're deploying our heavy units. Would recommend your fleet maintains at least 500,000 kilometers distance." Before Krithak could respond, the lunar surface split open. What emerged made his scales stand on end. It was a machine, but unlike anything the hegemony had ever built. It looked like a human in armor, but scaled up to impossible size, almost as large as the Titans themselves. "Warmind Prime units activated," the human command announced. "All standard forces clear the engagement zone." The giant mechanical warrior moved with shocking speed for its size. In one hand, it held what looked like a spear made of contained lightning. In the other, a shield that seemed to bend light around it. The human machine engaged the largest Titan directly, its weapons tearing holes in the creature's impossible geometry. "Sir," his science officer called out. The human weapons, they're not just damaging the entities. They're stabilizing local space-time. They're forcing our reality's physics onto these things. Krithak watched in fascination as more Warmind Prime units joined the battle. Each moved with perfect precision, their weapons designed not just to destroy, but to deny the Titans their ability to ignore physics. This wasn't just combat, it was the enforcement of natural law against beings that ignored it. Another hegemony ship vanished, taken by a Titan that had slipped through the human defense line. Krithak felt his heart clench. Those had been good crews, experienced warriors. Gone in an instant. All ships, increase distance, he ordered. Maintain observation, but priority is survival. The battle intensified. The human machines fought with a coordination that spoke of long experience. Their weapons transformed the space around the Titans, forcing them to exist by the rules of our universe, rules that the humans had clearly learned to bend themselves. Luna command to all forces. The human transmission came again. Breach readings critical. Preparing to deploy the Lightbringer protocols. The moon's surface opened once more, revealing what looked like a massive cannon. But instead of a barrel, it had rings of light that spun in impossible patterns. Energy readings went off the scale. What are they doing? Krithak wondered aloud. His answer came in the form of a beam of pure white light that shot from the lunar cannon. Where it struck, space itself seemed to crystallize. The Titans caught in its path weren't destroyed. They were forced fully into reality, their forms solidifying into shapes that finally made sense to the eye. And once they were solid, the Warmind units tore them apart. By all the stars, Krithak's first officer whispered, "They're not just fighting these things. They've spent generations learning how to kill them." Krithak nodded slowly. "And to think we considered them primitive." He watched as another Titan fell to the coordinated human assault. They weren't trapped on their world. They were guarding it, guarding all of us. The battle wasn't over, but Krithak had seen enough to know one thing. The galaxy would never be the same after today. Admiral Krithak had seen thousands of battles in his long career, but nothing like this. The human Warmind units moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, their massive forms graceful despite their size. Each motion was precise, every attack calculated. New contact. His tactical officer shouted, "Something's launching from Earth." Through the planet's atmosphere came a new type of human vessel. Smaller than the Warmind units but faster, these ships glowed with the same reality-bending energy. Their design was different, sleeker, more aggressive. Hunter-class interceptors deployed. Came the human transmission, beginning containment maneuvers. The new vessels darted between the larger Titans like insects around giants. But these insects had teeth. Each carried weapons that left trails of distorted space in their wake. Where they struck, the Titans' impossible forms began to crystallize, just like with the larger weapons. "Fascinating," Krithak's science officer muttered, recording everything. "The smaller ships are more maneuverable. They're herding the entities into kill zones." She was right. The hunter ships weren't just attacking randomly. They were driving the Titans into carefully planned firing lanes where the larger Warmind units waited. It was a hunting pattern Krithak recognized from his own world's ancient history, how his ancestors had hunted apex predators by driving them into prepared traps. A new tear opened in space, larger than the others. Through it came something that made even the hardened admiral's scales ripple with fear. It was like looking at a hole in the universe itself, a moving darkness that devoured light. "Class 5 Titan detected," Luna Command announced, their calm voice finally showing strain. "All units fall back to secondary positions, preparing the solar lance." Solar lance. Krithak wondered aloud. His answer came as the moon's surface split open once again. This time, what emerged was different. It looked like a piece of the sun itself, contained in a massive framework of technology that shouldn't have been possible for a primitive species. "Sir," his science officer called out, "those energy readings, they're channeling plasma directly from their star." The solar lance powered up, drawing a stream of solar plasma through contained fields that bent physics in ways that made Krithak's scientific mind hurt. The humans had learned to harness their own star as a weapon. The Class 5 Titan reached out with tendrils of void, destroying 2 hunter ships instantly. But the humans didn't retreat. Instead, more ships arrived, their formations tightening. All units, execute Protocol Daybreak, Luna Command ordered. Every human weapon opened fire at once. The hunter ships, the Warmind units, the lunar defense platforms, and finally, the solar lance itself. Space lit up brighter than a supernova. Krithak's bridge crew had to shield their eyes as their screens automatically darkened. When they could see again, the Class 5 Titan was gone. Not destroyed. Erased. The space it had occupied was now perfectly normal, as if reality itself had been scrubbed clean. "Report," Krithak demanded. "Sir," his tactical officer responded. "The humans, they didn't just kill it. They rewrote the laws of physics in that space. They made it impossible for these things to exist there." Krithak watched as the remaining human forces regrouped, moving with the same practiced efficiency to deal with the remaining Titans. Each movement was purposeful, each strategy refined by what must have been generations of combat. "They're not soldiers," he realized aloud. "They're monster hunters. And they've been doing this for a very, very long time." The battle was over, but the cost was clear to see. Pieces of destroyed hunter ships floated in space alongside crystallized fragments of the Titans. 3 of the massive Warmind units stood damaged but triumphant, their armor scarred by weapons that denied reality itself. Admiral Krithak studied the aftermath through his flagship's view screen. The lunar surface was scarred with massive black marks where the defensive platforms had overloaded. The solar lance hung silent now, its framework still glowing with residual heat. "Incoming transmission from Luna Command," his communications officer announced. "Put them through," Krithak ordered, curious about what the humans would say now. A tired but firm voice filled the bridge. "Hegemony Fleet, this is Commander Sarah Chen. We appreciate your fleet maintaining safe distance during the incursion. However, we need to discuss what happens next." Krithak straightened his spine. "Indeed we do, Commander. I have many questions." "As do we," Chen replied. "But first, we need your help. That battle damaged 30% of our defensive grid. Our long-range sensors indicate another tear forming in the Kuiper Belt. We don't have time to repair everything before it opens." The Admiral's scales rippled with surprise. "Another one? So soon?" "They're coming more frequently now," Chen explained, her voice heavy with concern. "This was the 3rd incursion this month. Usually, we only see Class 5 Titans once or twice a year. Something's changed." Krithak's tactical officer spoke up. "Sir, I'm analyzing the battle data. The humans' defensive network. It's not just protecting Earth. The way it's positioned, it's protecting the entire approach vector to the galactic core." The realization hit Krithak like a plasma bolt. "You're not just defending your system, are you, Commander? You're defending everyone." A brief silence followed. "Yes," Chen finally admitted. "Earth sits at a crucial junction point between dimensions. The Titans, they're drawn to sentient life. If they break through here in force, they'll have a straight shot at the most populated sectors of the galaxy." Krithak looked at his bridge crew, seeing the same understanding dawn in their eyes. The humans hadn't been trapped on their world by primitive technology. They had been standing guard. "Commander," he said, "I'm offering the assistance of my fleet. We may not have your specialized weapons, but we can help with repairs and monitoring." "Appreciated, Admiral," Chen responded. "But there's something else you need to know. These incursions, they're getting stronger because the dimensional barriers are weakening. Not just here, but everywhere. Earth has been holding the line, but we're going to need help to face what's coming." Krithak watched as human repair ships emerged from the moon's hangars, beginning their work on the damaged defenses. Each movement was efficient, practiced. the result of generations spent maintaining their eternal vigil. The hegemony needs to understand. Chen continued, we didn't stay on Earth because we couldn't leave. We stayed because we had to. Because if we didn't, there wouldn't be a galaxy left to explore. The Admiral made a decision then, one that would change the course of galactic history. Commander, I'm sending a priority message to the Hegemony Council. They need to know what I've seen here, what you've been fighting. Thank you, Admiral, Chen replied. But hurry. Those readings from the Kuiper Belt, they're getting stronger. And this time it feels different. Whatever's coming, it's bigger than anything we faced before. Krafak looked at the battle-scarred lunar surface, the damaged but unbroken defenses of humanity. They had stood alone against the darkness between realities for so long, but not anymore. Not if he had anything to say about it. Admiral Krafak stood in the Lunar Command Center alongside Commander Chen, watching holographic displays of the growing dimensional tear in the Kuiper Belt. Around them, humans worked at their stations with practiced efficiency, their movements precise and purposeful. The command center was nothing like he had expected. Instead of primitive computers, he saw technology that rivaled or exceeded the hegemony's best. Screens showed real-time dimensional stability readings across the galaxy. Three-dimensional maps tracked tiers and weaknesses in reality itself. Your monitoring network, Krafak said, gesturing at the displays with one of his four arms. It extends far beyond your system, doesn't it? Chen nodded, her face illuminated by the holographic lights. We have stealth satellites across this entire sector of the galaxy. That's how we know it's getting worse. She touched a control, and the map zoomed out. Red dots appeared everywhere, showing potential breach points. The barriers between dimensions are failing, she continued. What you saw today, that was just the beginning. We've calculated that within 5 years, these incursions will be happening everywhere, not just at weak points like Earth. Krafak's scales paled. The hegemony has no defenses against these entities. No one does, Chen replied. Except us. We've spent the last 300 years developing weapons and tactics to fight them, but we can't be everywhere at once. A young human officer rushed up to them. Commander, energy readings from the Kuiper Belt tear just spiked. It's unlike anything we've seen before. The main screen shifted to show the tear. It was growing faster than the previous ones, its edges pulsing with impossible colors. Krafak felt his heart skip a beat at the sight. Launch the remaining Warmind units, Chen ordered. Get the hunter squadrons ready. Admiral, I hate to ask, but we could use your fleet's help with perimeter control. Krafak straightened. The hegemony fleet is at your disposal, Commander. We may not have your specialized weapons, but we can help contain the situation. Chen smiled for the first time since he'd met her. That's exactly what we need. Your ships can help herd these things into our kill zones. Fighting Titans is all about controlling the battlefield. Alarms began blaring throughout the base. The tear in the Kuiper Belt had grown to twice the size of any previous breach. The readings were off the charts. Commander, Krafak said, making a decision that would change everything. I'm officially requesting Earth's admission into the galactic hegemony, not as a subject world, but as a full military ally. We need your knowledge, your technology, your experience. Chen looked surprised, then thoughtful. We've stayed isolated because we had to focus on the defense. But maybe it's time for that to change. We can't fight this alone anymore. The alarms grew louder. The tear was still growing. First things first, though, Chen said, turning back to the displays. We need to survive what's coming through that tear. Alert the Solar Lance crews. Wake up all reserved Warmind units, and get me a direct line to Earth's Defense Council. Krafak watched as the humans mobilized for battle with practiced speed. They had warned his fleet to run, not out of fear or weakness, but because they had known what was coming. They had tried to protect even those who had come to conquer them. Now, standing in their command center, watching them prepare to face another impossible threat, Krafak finally understood. Humanity had never been trapped on their world by primitive technology. They had been imprisoned by duty, by the need to stand guard against horrors beyond imagination. And now, finally, they would no longer have to stand alone. The tear in the Kuiper belt had grown to a size that dwarfed anything in human records. Through it came something that made the Class 5 Titan look like a minor threat. It was vast beyond comprehension, a being of such impossible geometry that the human sensors couldn't even capture its full form. Mother of Stars, Krithak whispered, all four of his arms gripping the command rail. Commander Chen's voice remained steady as she gave orders. All Warmind units, full power. Hunter squadrons, begin containment pattern Delta. Hegemony fleet, maintain the perimeter. Don't let any smaller entities slip through. The massive entity emerged fully into normal space, trailing fragments of broken reality behind it. It was followed by dozens of lesser titans, like a dark god leading its army. Commander, a sensor operator called out. It's affecting dimensional stability across the entire system. The barriers, they're starting to fail everywhere. Chen's jaw tightened. This is it. The moment we've trained for. Initialize the Prometheus protocol. Krithak turned to her. The what? Our final option, she answered, entering a complex series of commands. We've had it ready for centuries, hoping we'd never need it. Admiral, get your fleet behind Luna's orbit. Now. Krithak didn't argue. He'd learned to trust human judgment. As his ships retreated, he watched in awe as the entire lunar surface began to transform. The moon itself was changing, panels and structures emerging from hidden depths. The entire satellite was one massive weapon. All personnel, battle stations, Chen announced. Charging the Prometheus array. Time to show these entities why you don't corner a species that spent its entire history learning to kill gods. The moon glowed with power, energy readings beyond anything Krithak's instruments could measure. The massive entity seemed to sense the threat, reaching out with void tendrils to attack. Not this time, Chen said quietly. Now. The Prometheus array fired. The moon itself seemed to pulse, sending out a wave of pure golden energy that expanded in all directions. Where it touched the void entities, they didn't just die. They ceased to exist. Reality itself was being rewritten, enforced, strengthened. The massive entity fought back, its form writhing as it tried to resist. But humanity had spent centuries preparing for this moment. The Warmind units and hunter ships struck in perfect coordination, their weapons synchronized with the array's energy. It's working, someone shouted. The dimensional barriers are stabilizing. Krithak watched in amazement as the giant entity began to break apart, its impossible form unable to exist in a space where reality itself refused to bend. The lesser titans following it were simply erased, leaving nothing behind but normal, stable space. When it was over, the solar system was quiet again. The tiers had closed. The barriers were stronger than ever. Chen turned to Krithak, exhaustion finally showing on her face. Admiral, when you return to the Hegemony Council, tell them this. Earth is ready to join the galactic community, but not as a subject world. We come as guardians, as teachers. Your people need to learn what we know, how to fight what lies between realities. Because this isn't over. Krithak nodded slowly. The Hegemony came here expecting to find primitives. Instead, we found the protectors of all existence. I think it's time the galaxy learned what humanity really is. As repair ships began their work and cleanup crews moved to collect data, Krithak looked at the battle-scarred moon, the tired but proud humans, and the now peaceful space where impossible horrors had been erased from existence. The warning made sense now. Humanity hadn't been telling the Hegemony to run out of fear. They had been trying to protect them, just as they had been protecting everyone all along.